Folks, welcome everyone. Let's begin our live stream that I entitled Secrets of Flow. I'm Alexei Zheglov, broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. Welcome to what I hope is just the first episode of this series. First of all, don't be shy. And please type in the comments that you're listening and where you're listening from. Hello, Toronto. I know some folks from Toronto are definitely listening right now. So please let me know about yourself and the fact that you are watching this or listening to me at this minute. So, first of all, I just want to say I don't want this to be a webinar, and I want you not to treat today's episode as a webinar. I don't want you to feel the pressure like, okay, I'm looking at the screen right now, I sort of have to pay attention, here's the topic, or... Actually, I didn't want to do it on Zoom because, again, I don't want you to be uncomfortable with, like, okay, well, should I mute myself? Did I mute myself? Should I unmute myself? Should I, hide my video? Should I feel guilty about, that black box that other people will see in Zoom and so on and so forth? So, I want you to be kind of in between things. This is the lunch hour, 12 o'clock in the Eastern time zone of Canada and the United States. Depending on which time zone you are in, you can, let's say, have lunch, maybe have a snack, get yourself a coffee, take a break, and let's talk about some topics of common interest. So, I'm Alexei Zheglov, and so I just wanted to show off some badges about who I am, what I do. Some people who may be listening right now already know me, that's why. Those who might stumble upon this recording later might not know. So, folks, for the last 12, maybe 13 years, I have associated myself quite closely with what is known as the Kanban method, and it's really a global movement. And it's about improving companies that make some sort of intellectual, professional, modern products and services. It could be in high tech, it could be in life sciences, could be in all sorts of professional services. Basically, people work with their brains, and then you have to run a business that somehow sells the very volatile products of our creative thoughts into very volatile markets, and this is very difficult to manage. So companies and people often end up with unsatisfactory results, such as burnout, poor sales, and dissatisfied customers. And so we want to do something about it, and this is what Kanban is in a nutshell. Yes, it is one of the methods, there are others, and we can of course debate methodologies, but that's not what we'll be doing today. Within this movement, I did attain a certain status. For a long time, I've been an accredited trainer on Kanban, I've been also an accredited consultant, also led a program to develop new coaches and consultants who can effectively teach our improvement methods to others. For all that work, I received some recognition, such as I'm counted among the so-called distinguished fellows of Kanban University. Also, one of my achievements, and it's also my privilege, is to be a founder of a small Canadian firm called SquirrelNorth. We founded it with several co-founders several years ago, and we found what I believe was a very simple idea, is that when it comes to improving companies, improving the ways of working, why does everything have to be a 2-day class or a 6-month coaching contract? Those are two favorite vehicles chosen by vendors and their clients alike for delivering some kind of methodological or process improvement advice or whatever ongoing professional education for their staff. And obviously these two extreme modes, just training or just coaching, have their drawbacks, and we wanted to make it much more balanced. The right combination of each, and at the right time and the right budget. And so that was our idea. This is something I consider my achievement, just even being able to meet with my co-founders and start this business, let alone continue it for several years. And of course, this is also kind of what I feel like a privilege. And I also want to mention there's a book that I wrote, actually co-wrote, with David J. Anderson, who is the pioneer of the Kanban method. Although the book, Fit for Purpose, is not about Kanban, this is not an Agile book. And it's really just a book about business. It's about markets, customers, and all sorts of irrational ways how customers choose our products and services, yet how we can understand our irrational customers and satisfy them and keep them and make it a sustainable business. Folks, in my window that I'm glancing at on the screen, I'm seeing that well, the count of concurrent viewers has increased somewhat. I noticed that people are like posting where they're watching this from, and at this point, I just want to say, so if you missed the first few minutes, don't worry about it. I was just going about some introductions. And I suppose most of you decided to watch this or listen to this because you saw an announcement on LinkedIn. And, well, if you saw it, that's probably because, you know, you knew me from some previous interaction or engagement. So thank you very much for coming here today. What I'd like to ask you to do is, besides chatting about where you're listening from, please also think about the question you would like to ask. What I'd like this broadcast to be today and in subsequent iterations is a place where some hard questions can be asked and answered. Some of you took my training classes in the past several years, or took classes with my esteemed colleagues from SquirrelNorth and several other business associates. And sometimes it happened in those classes that there was a really difficult question asked. Somebody brought in their difficult situation, their difficult case of applying some improvement method and what sort of situation they ran into. And some really interesting discussion followed, and sometimes I was able to give a good answer. And that was a moment that I would like to repeat more frequently, and we don't necessarily need to have that training class as like the setup, the reason how we get in the room and get to talk about these things. We could kind of replicate that environment in this virtual studio. So if you have such a question on your mind, feel free to type it in the chat window, and I will, of course, try to answer it live on this broadcast. Or perhaps we'll save it for the next iteration, or maybe there could be some questions that really need a written response. In this case, maybe I'll just write an article and just publish it for everyone's use and enjoyment. So please think of questions like this, and I'll try to get them later in this video. Also, one maybe last organizational thing. As I said, I don't want this to be a webinar, and I don't want you to treat this as a webinar. I'd rather speak about multiple topics within this hour and not, again, make it like a webinar on a specific topic, specific practice, or technique, or tool, or whatever. And just speak about it for an hour and then take a few questions about what I just said. Instead, again, questions that you ask, questions that some people asked me ahead of this broadcast, I'd like to spend several minutes on them and then move on to the next question and to the next question. So maybe the very next topic won't be very interesting to you, but, well, maybe right after that it will be something of interest to you, and vice versa. So I intend to keep these chunks relatively small, and what I'd like to do after this broadcast is over is to annotate the video so that we keep those moments. Let's say at the 13-minute mark, I was talking about this topic, and then I said something, and that was useful, and we can just save that moment because it will be marked with the timestamp on, like in the YouTube video comments. So let's. So I'd like to start with something that's just on my mind, and there's a number of questions been asked of me lately, and so one of them kind of really stuck with me because it's like one of my colleagues asked for help, asked for advice, and somehow it was relatively straightforward on one hand, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of like really interesting takeaways that we can take from that particular situation that my colleague described. So on the surface, it's like a plain vanilla. There's some sort of agile going on in some companies. Somebody's trying Kanban, and okay, how do I do this and how do I do that? And that's like on the surface doesn't sound very interesting, but I think there are some really deep thoughts that this particular person had, and I would like to analyze and reflect on that, and hopefully for everyone's benefit. So this particular person is working at a company that, well, you can think of it as a sort of, I should actually not disclose or like be too specific or hint what that company is. And of course, people in Toronto, if I give you too much detail, you will figure this out. So I'll be careful. So I want to anonymize this sufficiently. So it's a kind of a bureaucratic organization that is not particularly fast, and they actually outsourced quite a lot of their implementation. So most of what my colleague called a team are actually just project managers and business analysts, and a lot of technical implementations, particularly some software coding, has been outsourced to multiple vendors. The customers don't ask this organization for very tight timelines. Generally, something, let's say 3 to 6 months, is fit for purpose. So if you take, let's say, up to a year with those projects, well, that's not very good. So they will be unhappy. But 3 to 6 months is fine. Someone could say, well, this is not very agile, and what about these, teams of just business analysts and project managers throwing some stuff over the fence to outsourcing vendors? This is not agile. You need to, like 3 to 6 months, that's like 20th century. You need to be more agile nowadays. Let's have 2 week sprints, cross-functional teams, and whatnot and whatnot. So, folks, this sort of thinking used to be quite popular, let's say in the previous decade, and we have to realize this is not what customers are paying this organization for. Right? So they have certain needs, they have certain criteria, and actually, the way this business works already, and as far as like timelines, well, it is sort of good enough. And for better or worse, the decision has already been made that some implementation will be outsourced, and maybe this isn't really central to this organization's mission. Where this organization really adds value is really knowing the domain inside and out, and that's why they have all the analysts in-house, and they know a thing or two about the customers they deliver to, a lot more than, let's say, their vendors do. And they do add some value through this customer contact and in the way how they hand it out hand it over to customers in the end. So let's not judge how this business is set up, and let's figure out some better ways for it to improve our current situation. So my colleagues asks further, well, we started taking our first steps with Kanban. All right, this gets my attention because Scrum, and we actually tried it, and it wasn't a good fit because the amount of time it takes our vendors to do anything, well, sure, it doesn't fit any reasonable time box. So we very soon realized that's just not a good fit for us, so we need to explore Kanban and get started with this. So, folks, those of you who know me well enough know that this sort of raises some number of red flags with me. And I'm going to take a very short technical break and be back in a few seconds so that we can examine those red flags. Folks, please bear with me for a few seconds. So it does appear that no matter how much I prepare the video equipment and everything, it will still throw a surprise. And those of you who remember some of the pandemic era training classes over Zoom may remember how this sometimes there is some sort of hiccup and something that's supposed to be pretty straightforward just refuses to work at the last moment. And so well, this is not what I wanted to do. Folks, I'm sorry about this, but sometimes it's just technology doesn't cooperate. So So let's examine some of the red flags that were raised by my colleagues. Some red flags I saw. So, folks, we tried methodology X and it didn't work for us, so we decided to switch to methodology Y. This is like very common pattern, and people do it with Scrum and Kanban. They do it with Kanban in design thinking, and they do it with DevOps and whatever. The root of all of this is that people often fail to critically examine their actual business environment. And that's basically the reason why methodology X didn't work for them. But guess what? That's a common failure pattern for all methodologies. And so they switch from X to Y, and Y doesn't work, so let's try Z, and Z doesn't work, and then they go through the whole alphabet soup until they realize that really it's not about the methodology, it's about them. Folks, as far as Kanban, for example, one of the ways you get started with Kanban is, of course, the systems thinking approach to introducing Kanban, and that's something we know by a catchy acronym STATIK. Well, one of the steps of STATIK is the so-called demand analysis. And if you've taken appropriate Kanban training, you know this, and you've done an exercise of doing demand analysis in an actual environment, in a real world environment, and you do it in the real world environment, even inside the training class. Then you can, of course, practice it repeatedly in your actual real-world environment repeatedly, and you gradually learn the skill. This is one of the ways you critically examine your actual environment, because doing demand analysis as part of STATIK asks you to recognize all sorts of customers you have, what they ask you for, what their fitness criteria are, what is your current delivery capability to deliver against all that, and so on and so forth, so that you can respond with a better system. So Kanban does help you kind of examine your environment more critically, and that's why you have actually more chances of success, more chances to do something meaningful, and chances greater than that for you to succeed than, let's say, if you uncritically simply implement some methodology out of a book. So, however, it does happen a lot that people simply make a superficial switch to Kanban. They adopt some ceremonies that they've seen some other teams and organizations practice, and, well, they skip the important step of actually examining their environment critically, and that basically sets them up for failure, and it just becomes a switch from something to Kanban, which turns into a switch from Kanban to something else, and usually gives a bad name to Kanban. But anyway, so I wanted to probe at this moment what my colleague would say about the reasons for the switch. Like, why are they considering, let's say, applying Kanban? Why do they think it's going to help? What do they notice in their business environment? And so, and at this point, I just want to say something about the thought process, and this may be useful. This was useful to me, and this may be useful to you as you, let's say, talk to someone. Maybe talk to someone new who brings a question to you, and you are trying to help them. So, folks, Bayesian thinking. And this is like one of the probabilistic schools of thought. When you assign some probability, it's called Bayesian prior, to some event or to something that you really don't know about, right? It's going to be revealed to you eventually, but for now it's not yet revealed, and so you just have to guess you don't know. And let's say I assign a very low probability to something. Let's say I'm out on the street and I forgot to look up the weather forecast. I don't know what probability of rain is today and what number did the meteorologist assign to rain in today's forecast. And let's say my Bayesian prior is 0. I assume there will be no rain today, and a meteorologist actually forecasted no rain for today. And then I noticed one of the people in the street is carrying an umbrella. Well, it kind of contradicts my prior. But maybe not. Maybe this is just a person who cannot tolerate one drop of rain, and that's why they carry an umbrella. But then I notice 3, 5 people with umbrellas. I realize that, well, actually now it's quite likely that at least some of them have checked the weather forecast. And the meteorologist gave some non-trivial chance of rain in that forecast. Maybe 50%, maybe 100%, maybe 30%. But many people decided to carry umbrellas as the result. And so I now update my prior based on the observation, and now it's not 0. It's maybe 50%. So I now believe that the meteorologist actually put a number like this in the forecast. And so I'm speaking to my colleague, and my prior is that basically I assume he knows a thing or two. He uses words like Scrum, Kanban, Agile, customers, and he works in an organization that's been trying all these things for some time, so probably knows what he's talking about, knows what these things mean, how to apply them practically. And then, depending on what I hear next in our conversation, I may need to update this prior. And what I hear, and this is like a really red flag that I heard, was, okay, well, in Kanban we're going to do visualization. And should I visualize dependencies on the 2 implementation vendors that we have? And at this point, I do have to update my prior. And I have to I realize at this point that I'm talking to someone relatively inexperienced. Maybe he did take training and like something like Kanban Management Professional classes, something like that. But even if that's the case, maybe the post-training experience didn't really solidify for him what he learned in the classroom. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not, depending on what you actually do after training. So some of the lessons were forgotten. Folks, let's just, again, go back to what this company's process is. Like what it is in the real world. They deliver to a customer who's not particularly demanding when it comes to time. It's, 3 to 6 months delivery is fine. It's a company that doesn't see, let's say, software implementation as a particularly like important area of expertise that they must keep in house. So they outsourced some implementation to a couple of vendors, but they do add significant value by their understanding of the business domain and doing all sorts of analysis there, and also relationship with the customer, how they interact with them, particularly when they deliver the solution. So the process that this company has, in a nutshell, what people actually do. Process is what people actually do, right? It's not a diagram with boxes and arrows in SharePoint. The process is basically this. They do some sort of analytical work. They outsource chunks of implementation to vendors. They perform some sort of integration, and they manage relationships with clients, right, to whom they deliver the eventual solution. So these loops out to vendors, when some work is being sent to the vendor and then received and then incorporated into some work in progress, it's a critical feature of the process. Right? So if it's a critical feature of the process, if you describe the process in like the fewest words possible, here's some analysis, here's vendor 1, here's vendor 2, here's some integration, and here it is, right? Like, it's very difficult to describe this process in fewer words without leaving out some really important detail, right? Actually, none of these things are details. These are like major elements of the process. And so at this point, I realized that maybe it's not even the experience, the practical experience, a bit of knowledge that that my colleague lacked. It was kind of lack of compass that would orient him as far as what is good and not so good in this situation, right? So it's like we have to choose what to visualize. How do we choose? Like, there's an endless number of possibilities here. What do we visualize? And I realized that basically, like, to describe Kanban to this person, and folks, technology unfortunately is not my strong suit today. Because some video source is just dropping out for some reason, so I'm just gonna try to improvise here. So, folks, basically, one important thing about that a bit of advice I gave this person about Kanban, like, if he's going to succeed with it, if his colleagues are going to succeed with it, if his company is going to succeed with it, this is what they have to keep front and center. You drive out wishful thinking. So this principle points to the correct solution and away from an incorrect solution quite forcefully. Because, well, are these vendors a really important part of the process? Yes, they are. Are they a really important part of this business? Yes, they are. Are they the fact that the relationship with these vendors exists is a consequence of some important decision that was made in this business? Yes, of course. So if we are going to pretend we live in some unreal world, we're going to have a Jira board that visualizes tasks for our in-house business analysts and our product manager. And whatever happens with these vendors is somewhere off the board. That's going to be our unreal world. But if we want to actually accept the real world as it is, not pretend something was different than what it really is, then the answer is very clear. Of course, actually, whatever happens with these two vendors is almost the most important feature of, let's say, Kanban board that you are going to design for visualizing this process. So it's a very simple principle that dictates what should be visualized and what shouldn't be visualized, right? So for a Kanban system to be effective, it must somehow incorporate those two vendor loops into its design. So so whatever other practices of Kanban this colleague of mine is going to apply in their company, you can actually like select it using this very simple filter. Is it helping us understand the reality, how it really happens, or it just becomes sort of a checkbox that we implemented yet another checklist for some methodology, and we say we implemented it, so that several months later we can say, oh, it didn't work for us, and then move on to methodology Y, methodology Z, and so on and so forth. So that's really a principle. Now, speaking of Kanban, there is still one really important principle there, something like that without which is WIP limits. But again, simply putting some WIP limit on, let's say, the number of tasks of, let's say, that business analyst, while the biggest problem is an unreliable relationship with the vendor, now let's say a very long, unpredictable delivery from that vendor, that's not going to help much, right? So at some point, some new project will come along, and what the business analyst is going to say, well, I'm not going to pick it up because, I'm to this limit of 3, and all 3 things are basically blocked by the vendor, but, I've got this hard limit, I cannot take, well, it's not going to work. So you cannot just implement WIP limits in such mechanical fashion, but what you can still do is you can keep an eye on the whole inventory, and that of course include the work that is currently blocked because the vendor hasn't yet responded. Something that is tied up in a dependency on the vendor. And gradually find a way to bring it under control. So being mindful of it, and I'm just intentionally using this word mindful, so I hear about mindfulness in companies and businesses a lot, and what people often mean is some sort of break from meditation. And it's one possible meaning, but it's also more like being aware of something. So if, let's say, you have an inventory of, let's say, things you promised to your customer, things you haven't delivered yet, and let's say this inventory is growing, this is clearly a leading indicator of trouble ahead, longer and unpredictable times from we promise to here it is, as experienced by customers, and that's an important fitness criterion for customers. So customers are likely to become less happy, and our growing inventory is a leading indicator of that, and being mindful of it is important. So once we are mindful of it, of course we can now take some practices out of playbook to try to keep it under control, and this is really details. But being aware of it, knowing where to look for it, knowing how to see it, how to feel it, that is important, and that's an important skill to develop. So again, working daily to develop this sort of skill is something this company is going to have to be at on a daily basis if they are to succeed with Kanban. And then kind of a second question, I'm not retelling you the whole story of the conversation with this person that I had. So I'll just save one more question out of that story. He asked, how often should I meet with my outsourcing vendors? And this is again, this was like another update of one of my priors, and this is a very common question because people have difficulty feeling the scale of time in their business. And so again, folks, 3 to 6 months. This is roughly the scale of this arrow. This is how long this company delivers to its customers. Customers are okay with this. They don't actually need faster speed. And again, you can say this is not agile because this takes a very long time. Well, it's fit enough for its customers. So again, keeping it real and free of wishful thinking, if we are going to depend on vendors to contribute to this delivery process, what can we with almost mathematical certainty say about the time it should take the vendor to deliver to us? What's interesting, our customers have fit-for-purpose criteria, and one of them is time. Right? They think the time should be roughly this much. But we are also customers before our vendors. So we can have our own fitness criteria. Well, how do let's say, two sets of fitness criteria correlate? Well, let's just keep it simple, and I'm only asking about time. Well, clearly, the vendor has to deliver to us significantly shorter time. So I asked this man, like, let's say now if you're a customer in front of your vendors and you have to state your fitness criterion, how long should they take to deliver to you? Like what? A few weeks, maybe up to a month? And what's interesting is that he was really uncomfortable saying that maybe up to 2 months. No, like a month. Well, this kind of makes sense. Because after this vendor delivers to you, there may be another outsourcing loop to another vendor, and they might take a month. And before that, there's some analytical work done in the house, and after that, there's some integration work done in the house, and after that, there's some cut over to the client, and some customer-facing work to be done by people in the house, and all of that has to take maybe 3 to 6 months. So if the vendor doesn't have a reliable capability to deliver, let's say, these chunks of work that are sent to them within a month, well, this business is not in good shape. So okay, a month. So we kind of agreed on this. So maybe 3 to 4 weeks, something like that. Okay, so let's say you're sending this vendor a chunk of work. You meet at the start, you meet at the end, you meet in the middle. Again, he said they were meeting once every 2 weeks, and he wasn't feeling comfortable about that. Well, he was right. Like, so the gut feeling was right. Because let's say if you meet with a customer halfway into this 1 month timeline, this is not good, because basically, what if they didn't, for some reason, didn't even start the work? Can it happen? Yes. You're fine. What if they encountered some problem? What if they needed some data from you, and what if there was some kind of miscommunication? If you're finding out about this halfway into this timeline, it's already too late. So clearly, faster meetings are needed. And so at this point, I basically told him, look, like, this is very simple math. You need something done within a month. You divide it by 4 weeks, divided by some number between 5 and 10. You should be meeting more often than once a week. So like 2 to 3 times a week, like, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Thursday, or something like that. You have to be meeting with them more frequently. You have to keep your eyes on the road all the time, right? So you have to make sure that if something, if everything is okay, well, it's a short meeting. If something isn't okay, well, you didn't wait too long to find out. So anyway, folks, this was one example of like the sort of questions I get, and sometimes like it may seem trivial that like I just walk you through this story and I just reflected on the situation that my colleague described. I reflected somewhat on my thought process, like how I get all sorts of ideas and then how I update them based on new information that is suddenly revealed to me. But the thing is, these are some real companies that face these relatively simple questions, and sometimes they lack some of the relatively simple things, such as understanding the rhythm of time. Their business runs on a certain rhythm, and there are several overlapping rhythms, such as this is how we deliver to our customers, this is how our vendors deliver to us, and this is how often we should check in with our vendors, and this is how often we should check in with ourselves and with our in-house teams. All of these things run on their own rhythm. Some of them are faster than others, and some of them, are at 10 to 1 or 5 to 1 or 4 to 1 ratio to each other. So, folks, I spoke to for about 47 minutes, and I appreciate we are approaching now the end of time. And I plan to make it maybe more structured, and I'll also troubleshoot some of the technology issues. It seems like I already did, and then of course it threw me in for surprise. I'm really thankful to everyone, people connected from Toronto, from Austin, Texas, from Saskatoon, from Brazil. Thank you very much. There's one in Bengaluru, India. Excellent. And there are some questions about success in influencing organizations on flow and even introducing Kanban. Another question is how to best support organizations with decent agile delivery mechanisms, but little to no product management upstream capabilities. And there is another question, a philosophical one: is Agile dead? Thank you for this question. So, all right. Okay, how do I begin? So, I think, well, as far as is Agile dead, I would say I already answered these questions in parts during this video, such as when I spoke about one possible way of thinking about the situation that my like when I just considered the case of this anonymous company that was brought to me by my anonymous friend. The way to think about this company as look, the number of months they take to deliver a solution to their customers is just that's not what we should be doing in a century. Instead, they should reformat it into cross-functional teams and have 2-week sprints and whatnot. So the way of thinking that just refuses to acknowledge the reality of this company and how they are set up to work with their vendors, it doesn't lead you to unlock effective ways to work with these vendors. It doesn't lead you to effective feedback loops that are necessary to keep this vendor relationship and also customer relationship productive and effective. And that sort of way of thinking, that sort of approach, I would say it sounds so 2010, and we are in 2024. Now, the questions about um, supporting agile delivery mechanisms when upstream and product management capabilities are kind of absent. Like this is a big topic that I should probably not try to give a comprehensive answer in a few minutes that are left. Um, I would say I would just start maybe by saying that actually the lack of such capabilities isn't exactly a big disadvantage, because something that I find a lot of people don't appreciate, particularly when they, like Kanban people, when they try doing something upstream Kanban. Folks, good upstream is good downstream. And uh, we'll save the expanded version of this for the next episode, but think about this, like build, measure, learn cycle. Like think Eric Ries, lean startup. Who is going to run all those experiments? When you have, let's say, options in moving in the upstream, going through that funnel, they are promoted or discarded based on what information? Where do you get information? You have to run an experiment. Who runs all those experiments? You need capability with pretty significant throughput and very short cycle time, right? And that's a very good downstream. So good downstream enables uh, enables good upstream, and you may not be in a bad place to start with. So I'll just start with this and expand later. And successes in influencing organizations, a short answer to this is sometimes, and again, a more expanded version will have to wait. So I notice there is a huge opportunity for companies, and that's not a good kind of opportunity, is to actually take a wrong turn and go chase something at a significant expense of money and time, and it doesn't get them any closer to where they need to be. And sometimes a very effective way to influence this organization is to show them a more direct way, a simpler way, and keep them from taking a wrong turn. That's how it works sometimes, and sometimes it works differently. So I hope this is a good enough partial answer, taking only a couple of minutes. And this is definitely a very good seed for future discussions. Folks, at this point, I have to keep my promise. I said we're going to wrap up at 55 minutes sharp because it's 5 minutes to 1 o'clock in our time zone, or 5 minutes to whatever hour or half hour in your time zone. And your next meeting, your next activity, whatever you plan to do with the rest of your day is important, and you should take a 5 minute break and just do that next thing. And for me, there's clearly some homework to do on the technical side, and also as far as annotating whatever was said during this hour, so that we can come back to certain important bits of it in the future. So thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you all for your attention today. Have a great rest of your day and a great week ahead. Thank you and goodbye.